Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Cohen, the author of An Introduction to the Art and Science of Chinese Tea Ceremony. Today, we have a special bonus episode of follow-up to our 2026 tea technique research trip to Menghai. Here with me for today's podcast is senior editor Pat Penny.
Hey.
It was the two of us and a bunch of local friends this year in Menghai. Menghai is another Puer area. It's part of Sichuan. It's probably one of the more common of the two Bana tea areas, Menghai and Yiwu. And so this was our second year in a row in Yunnan, our second year in a row focusing on Shou Puer, although we did quite a bit of Shou Puer research this trip. And this is all in support of the eventual third book on Puer tea. Pat, how was the trip?
When I'm telling people after I came back home, like, what did you do on the trip? Inevitably, over the last 4 years, the answer is like, I drink a lot of tea. This year, I think the second thing I said to people was, I ate donkey. I think that's the second thing that came up. I don't know if it sums up the trip in any way, shape, or form, but it was awesome, man. It's always an experience. It's always really hard to kind of encapsulate for people, like, what we were doing for a week. It's like, yeah, I went to this one person's house. I drank tea. We walked up a mountain. We saw tea there. We drove to another place, drank tea with another guy. It doesn't, when you break it down into the moments, it doesn't really capture everything that we really did. But I feel like we were really able to, one, just get a really good sense of some of the environments of these well-known tea mountains, and really helped actually having the frame of reference of Yiwu, greater Yiwu area, just to pull comparisons. I think last year when we were in Yiwu, I obviously had other tea regions as a comparison, but didn't have anything else really within Yunnan or within Puer producing areas to compare to. And now having Yiwu as the backdrop and looking at all these new, to us, mountain regions, it was much easier to pick apart what's unique about this environment. And then we got to spend a lot of time with processors. We were a little less focused on seeing tea processing this time, although we did see some differences compared to what we had seen in Yiwu last year. But then we spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth to factories, seeing a little bit more of show production and a wider variety and ideology of show production than I thought we would be able to get exposed to in just 1 week's time. Yeah, I mean, it was a relatively short trip, actually, as far as your and I tea trips go. But yeah, damn, we did a lot. It was a big one.
A short trip for you.
That's true. Yeah, you continued on.
Pat was in China for about 10 days. I was in China for about a full month, for about a week before Pat got there, and then another 2 weeks after Pat left.
I mean, you literally landed, not to date this conversation, but you landed like 2 days ago, right?
I did. I'm 48 hours off this trip.
Yeah, I'd been back for like 2 weeks. So yeah.
Straight from the Longjing fields.
And that's what I'm drinking this morning. So it's perfect. It's like you brought it back for me.
I know. I wish.
I wish too.
So Pat's not drinking my fresh Longjing, and I'm not drinking my fresh Longjing. I am, of course, like every year, drinking Dansong.
So coming out of this trip, what Dansong bro, Yiwu bro, Menghai bro, where do you land?
Ooh.
The question everybody wants to know.
Question everyone wants to know. I'm certainly still a Dansong bro, but I will say that my Dansong consumption has been ever so slightly tempered with Wuyi, with Yinta. Mostly because since establishing that new relationship and since going back to Wuyi multiple times, my relationships there have really deepened. My access there has really deepened. And my wallet has suffered.
Tremendously.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I'm ever going to get used to paying like $3, $4, $5 a gram.
It's for the top tier of things, but when we were in Yiwu last year, what $3 or $4 or $5 a gram would buy you, I don't even know, because we found teas for $1 to $2 a gram that were top tier. So it's a hard shift to make. You were messaging me, asking me if I wanted to buy some teas, and I did the math on it quickly, and I was like, bro, that's not a lot of tea for a lot of money. Coming out of Menghai and Yiwu at the last two trips, the price for good access is very, very different.
Yeah. Although, I mean, we paid some price for access. We did go to some of the famous villages this trip, and we did see some tea. We tasted some tea that I think what they said was going for 6,000 RMB per fresh kilo. So that would probably be like 10 to 12,000 RMB per processed kilo.
It'd be about 5x per processed kilo.
That'd be even more. Oh, wow.
Yeah, like 30K RMB. Yeah, I mean, this is a village that everyone knows has a price tag attached to it. And, you know, that tea was good. Was it 30K RMB per kilo good? No, but it was great.
Do you have friends you need to show off to, Pat? Don't you have like some banquet dinners you need to host?
I don't have any state dinners, any government officials that I need to like really build guanxi with. So no need for that tea for me.
Don't you need a numbered tree with your?
I don't even know what 30K RMB is in USD. Let me just do a quick. Yeah, that's too much money for me. I just did the math. It's north of $4,000, which when you break that down, still is only $4 a gram. So it's just matching the high end of Wuyi. So once again, going from Puer to Yangcha, the price shock is real.
The price shock is real. The price shock is real. So no, I'm definitely still a dancehall bro. So I think maybe the thing to say is Menghai, I find in this trip, you were talking about the environment and what we got to do this trip. And I would say that in Yiwu, we did a lot of processing. We did a lot of tea processing. We really got deeply into variations in processing methodologies and the results and what it means for the resulting tea and tea quality. But we were basically dealing almost exclusively with high-end Gushu tea. One or two Qiaomus thrown in there. But I mean, we were pretty much on the real Gushu bandwagon at Yiwu. And then here in Menghai, I feel like our focus our focus, we go into these trips, we know what we want to research, but everything is based on what access we have, who we're working with, what they're willing to do and show us, the time period that we're there. There's a lot of factors that go into what we actually wind up researching. And sometimes we stumble into research questions that we didn't really know were going to have such depth and such interest. And I felt that to an extent, that's what we did this time, where my big takeaway from the trip was really forest management. My big takeaway was the difference and the diversity in environment, both because of the terroir and because of human intervention. And I would say that to an extent that we didn't see in Yiwu, I would say that Menghai has a greater range of environmental diversity on both aspects.
It definitely takes its place, I think, at both ends of the extremes. You've got everything in between, but we certainly saw none of the same level of deep forest that we saw in Yiwu. And we saw, a level of intensive garden management that we also never saw in Yiwu. I feel like Yiwu was maybe more like moderate in most levels of approach. People kind of were like, all right, that's the tea. It's deep in the forest. We're going to let it do its thing. We take care of it. Gotta do some pruning now and then. But we saw full blown like weed whackers blowing out fumes in the gardens in Labanjiang. We saw people like piles and piles and piles of cuttings and prunings, which makes sense time of year. People were getting rid of dead branches, but just on a level that we never saw in Yiwu. I will also say, for me, the bigger takeaway, in addition to the garden management, was just the scale. When we were in Yiwu last year, I was like, wow, there's a lot of tea in these forests, really deep in there after we've walked for 30 minutes. There was more accessible tea as well, not a ton of it, but when we were driving into any mountain range in Menghai, as you start going up the mountain, it's like, holy crap, there's tons of plantation tea all over the side of this mountain. And we just drive deeper and deeper, and there's just more and more and more plantation tea. And I mean, like Bulong, for example, we're driving for about 5 hours across this mountain range, hitting various villages, but the total drive time, probably somewhere between 3 and 5 hours. And it's nonstop tea the entire way. I mean, I feel like just on Bulong alone, we saw more tea than we ever saw across all of the different villages we went to in Yiwu. It was so much tea.
More plants, more density, higher cultivation rates, a lot more intervention. So each tree producing more leaf. Yeah. And I would say the surprising thing about that, the thing that I would say is most shocking about that is we did try some of the, what some people would call shengtai gushu, taidi cha, like literal plantation tea grown organically with bushes that are heavily trimmed, that look small and bushy, cutting ceiling, but that are over 100 years old.
That was a cool surprise, actually.
That was a cool surprise. And we tasted that tea and it was, I mean, was it mind blowing? Were we like, we're going to buy kilos of this? No.
Tidy cha bros all the way. Only tidy cha from here on out.
No, but I mean, it was good tea. It was totally acceptably good tea. It wasn't great tea. It wasn't tea that I'm going to go suggest everyone will go run to enjoy. But like, it felt fine to drink. It tasted fine. And I think that that's part of my takeaway from this trip is that it's easy to seek perfection. It's easy to critique the density and the forest practices and all that. But at the end of the day, most of the tea that we were having, even if it wasn't the best tea ever, even if it wasn't our favorite tea, there was very little of it that it was full on rejection. Like, nope, this is bad. This isn't good.
There might have only been 1 or 2 teas that we had a few brews and we're like, yeah, we're done. Even yes, a lot of things went over the plate as just like average, but I think there's only 1 or 2 teas the whole trip that were like, ooh, I don't want to drink this. Yeah, no, thank you. Which is still a pretty good average compared to a lot of our other trips. Yiwu, notwithstanding, the rest, well, Wuyi was the bad one, but Yiwu may have been the only place we didn't have any bad tea. But that once again goes back to who we were with.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this goes to a question that we chatted a little bit about during our pre-trip recording, which was the advice to beginners and just buy factory tea cakes. We saw a lot of factory tea material on this trip. We hung out with some factory tea sourcers. The tiny Gushu Shengtai that you're referring to is a large factory's plantation tea. I feel a lot more comfortable recommending plantation in factory tea to people now.
Same.
We went to the headquarters of a large factory, had tea at the cafe. Everything that we kind of had related to this brand was all like totally good. Yeah.
Totally good. Yeah. You go into a random third wave coffee shop and you order a good coffee and you're like, I'm totally satisfied with this coffee. It's more like that than like showing up at a famous coffee farm and saying, give me this year's prized micro lot. There's certainly a difference here, and we judge those teas a little bit differently. Sitting in the factory cafe and getting to drink with some of the factory people. I guess to our point, to your point, to my point is like, it's not bad. We're not saying to people, don't drink this.
I think just based on the kind of access we have and what we do, I'm going to continue not seeking out factory material because it doesn't make sense with my preferences. And honestly, from an economic standpoint anymore either. Factory tea is just exorbitantly pricey for old tea, but even fresh tea, the prices are also marked up pretty interestingly because of some of the franchising and buying stipulations. But yeah, I mean, we went last year to a Dai shop when we were in Kunming, and we had said, I think on our recap that we bought some 7542. It was totally enjoyable. I feel, yeah, very positively about factory tea coming out of this trip, but it's not going to really make its way into my purchasing habits.
No. But I also feel much more comfortable drinking it, knowing that they've really, when they say that they converted to more organic practices, that they mean it.
Yeah, no, I mean, the plantation that you and I had seen, which was called Yiwan Mu, is like 10,000 acres or 10,000 mu. Yeah. And this is on Bulong. It was just like, as far as you could see, little tidy, Gushu tidy everywhere.
Gushu tidy.
The environment was clean. We were seeing bugs, hearing birds. It was more than just picturesque, right? Like it felt healthy. The air was clean. So yeah, I feel really positive about factory tea after this trip.
Switching gears there, because I think that we got a little off the rails. The point that I was making earlier was that compared to Yiwu, the terroir diversity, not just the forest management diversity, but the terroir diversity was so much more varied in Menghai. I think the thing that really surprised me is we went to one famous village and it was like being in a jungle, right? It was wet, it was moist, it was lush. There was literal, almost like a Wuyi Jian with a flowing river, moving water, literally tea growing next to banana trees, which I don't think I've seen before. And then the next day we go to a different village, which is over 2,200 meters, and it is alpine. It's cold. Yeah. The tea is growing next to pine trees. And the idea that both of these are Menghai, the idea that both of these are part of one region, so to speak, they're as much of a region. Yeah, they're both Menghai, sure, but this is as distant or as much of a difference in region and terroir as, say, like Mahe from Yibang, maybe even a little closer.
Even I would say even more different than those two, personally.
Yeah, more different, certainly more different. But like as distance and as what constitutes a region, these aren't on the same mountain, despite being both Menghai tea. Mm-hmm. But I think that was a real surprise because everyone tries to map certain flavors or certain attributes to the different tea regions. They say Menghai is strong and aggressive and it's the king of tea, and Yiwu is softer and more delicate and it's the queen of tea. And we're like, yeah, but there's Catherine the Great and there's Queen Victoria, and like there's some real differences here.
Yeah. This year, since we had the experience of Yiwu, I didn't come into this trip thinking like, yeah, I know what all these regions in Menghai taste like, because I found that was disproved for me in terms of Yiwu. So I came in a little humbler, but I think what I came out of the trip with was my previous preconceived notions of Menghai area tea were really all formed around Bulong. So I had an idea that, all right, Menghai tea is this, but really it was Bulong area tea is this, and many things to the east and the north, and you don't get much further south than Bulong, but really the east and the north of the Menghai area really ran counter to my initial impression of what Menghai area tea could be, particularly some of the farmers that we had visited and their tea, which is higher end. We even went to some areas that I think we talked about in our pre-trip recording. So like Pasha was an example. Yeah. That was an area that we were like, is Pasha even like Menghai? Like we weren't sure. We were talking about it. And it's one of those areas that we said we weren't really like super hot on. But then we went to Xinyutang, the kind of famous garden on the top of Pasha. And while there's probably some meh tea from that area, I believe there's also fabulous tea there. And it does not conform to my preconceived notion of what Pasha was, or to what my preconceived thought of Menghai tea in general. So yeah, I think the diversity that we saw and the diversity that we tasted was much broader than what I had expected. And I think is much broader than what other people believe as well.
I think we need to be intellectually honest and say to listeners that in our pre-trip recording, our hot or not assessment, I would just give us like a 0%. I would just say we were wrong, everything except Xinbanjiang.
Yeah, very true. Yes. Xinbanjiang, not hot. Yeah. We had no idea before, I think, landing in Menghai. And after we really did some legwork, we got out to basically all the famous, well-known mountains.
A bunch of the less known. We went to some mountains I had never heard of.
Very true. And the teas were, I think we got surprised everywhere. Whether for good or for bad, we were often surprised. Things ran counter to our preconceived notions.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. And we found some good teas. I think, to me, Menghai is interesting in that because of the way that it has developed and because of who is involved in the tea. I think that hopefully no one takes any great offense in me saying this, but I feel like Yiwu is more Han and Menghai is much less Han in the tea world. And because of that, there's a little bit less of this literati scholar tradition. One of the things that I think that we found in Yiwu is that people really hold on to past teas as library teas and say, we can go back and we could taste what a tea from this region, from this year was like, and we can compare this to our new tea and have a memory and know whether the tea is of the same standard, if it's going to age in the same way. And we did not find that in Menghai. Menghai was like, farmers are going to move their tea. Like at the end of the season, if they have anything left, it will be discounted and it will be sold.
We were traveling with a sourcer who's really well regarded by a lot of these farmers. And even then, it was hard for the farmers to find anything that they felt like confident sharing with us because they just don't have any tea left on hand. It's right before the harvest. They might still have a little bit of a select pick here from last year or a little bit of a Gushu pick there. They're business people and they're really trying to move their stock. It's a very different vibe than what we ran into in Yiwu for sure.
So it's a very different vibe. And the other thing, because of that, and I think that this plays deeply into it, I think that it's much more, we were asking people what their normal practices. When you do select trees, do you normally do Tiancha and Kucha together? When you do pure Wushu cheese, do you mix across these different, you have gardens on both sides of a ridge, do you mix those? And basically the answer across the board from every farmer, even the farmers who had great tea that you and I actually made some small purchases from, they were like, oh, we do whatever the Laoban wants. Like Laoban asks and they can have. We make to order.
Yeah. If you're paying, we've got it. Yeah. I mean, I think left to their own devices, they would just be having the garden picked and processed together. Yeah. It's a very different style. And it really is, I think, very economically driven as far as what teas get made in Menghai today. Was that always the case? I don't know. But it's definitely whoever's the buyer is making the decisions. I don't think Yiwu is always different. I think we were often traveling with basically Laban, right?
Our contacts were mix of farmers and farmers who are also tea makers. I think there's a difference when you have your own label. Right? I don't think any of the farmers I think only one farmer that we were with in Menghai had their own label, their own house.
Yeah, that's true. Often, many of the makers, it seems, sold into a village cooperative, or they sold directly to somebody who has been buying their tea for a few years or many years. The business practices of Menghai and Yiwu seem very different, but the way that shows up as far as the scholarship and appreciation of tea, we're definitely very different.
There was a few people. I mean, we have one very good, I would call her negociant, whose sister is in ultra tier Gushu garden, but who sources from her sister's garden and also sources around from others. Like, she obviously had some real tea scholarship going. Like, we sat down and the first thing she handed us was a 4-tree Gushu blend.
Casual ultra select pick of Labanjiang. Yeah. No, she got street cred real fast.
Yep.
I don't know that we emphasize this enough. Everybody who hosts us is like extremely gracious with their time, beyond sharing amazing tea with us. Like, she went so out of her way to make sure that we got to experience what we were hoping to try and experience. The level of hospitality we receive in China is always next level, but she definitely went out of her way to really make sure that we got the experience that we wanted. And is a contact that I think we'll continue to reach out to when it comes to learning about Menghai.
Absolutely. And you know, it's true scholarship when we say, can we buy this? And she says, no, this is for my personal consumption.
Yeah, I have just this bag. This is mine.
This bag. This is
mine.
You cannot.
Sorry, no.
Take this from me.
Please no.
Dead fingers.
You can literally have anything else for free. She was just going to give us tea. We were like, ooh, everything else was good. Nothing else was that 4-tree blend.
So turning to that other point, forest management, this is something that came roaring into my consciousness in a way that maybe I was unprepared for. And like any good little scholar boy, I've read James E. Scott's Seeing Like a State and totally up on the hit books. In my defense and for posterity, I read that book before it was cool.
Before it got recommended across every Manosphere podcast.
Yeah, before it got recommended across every Manosphere podcast. Can you imagine getting that book recommended to you by Rogan? It's not my jam. I may have studied some related things in college, but you know, one of his chapters in that book is on high modernist forest management. And that chapter was so pertinent to what was going on in Menghai, because the thing that really struck me, you know, gardens in Yiwu are basically unmanaged in comparison. Pat, you had just mentioned that we saw weed whackers. We saw them literally lawn mowing the forest between the Gushu trees.
Yeah, I got a good video actually, and I planted to share this on Instagram. But it's like, as we're walking down into this famous, well-known touristy garden area, because it's got some of the most expensive trees in Labanjiang, the most expensive, you just start to hear this buzz, this drone. And you're getting closer and closer, and the drone is just getting louder and louder. And suddenly you hear no bugs, you hear no birds. All you hear is weed whackers. And you're like, where are these things? And you look, and they're literally just like toppling the ground in between all the trees. I mean, not a blade of grass left behind.
Is that good? Is that bad? You know, it's so easy to have this knee-jerk reaction, say, well, this is bad. You shouldn't be using weed whackers and lawn mowing the forest between the Gushu trees. To an extent, I believe that. To an extent, I think that lower intervention is better. But can I say that that tea is bad? Well, I don't think it's worth its astronomical price. It's very much a tourist name brand bragging garden. But is it bad? I don't think so.
I mean, it's still 100+ year Gushu tea from an extremely well-known area, famous area, that is famous for a reason, because the good tea from that area is great. Are the fumes that the weed whackers are putting off more or less harmful than the different weeds that might grow around the tree and take some of the nutrients in the soil? It's a hard argument to definitively know.
In a way, it's a hard argument to definitively know, but would those weeds really be a problem if they were allowed to grow naturally? Certainly, there's a cycle of plant growth and weed growth. So the weeds are going to grow, they're going to deplete some things. Some of the weeds are going to die. Hardier trees or hardier plants are going to take their place in between the gushu. And it's not like we saw in Yiwu that trees were dying because there's too many weeds around because the dandelions were next door, right?
The dandelions with their notoriously deep roots that are going as far down as the 100-plus-year-old tea tree roots. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have difficulty accepting that the trade-off is worth the marginal increase in yield. What, by weed whacking, they get an extra, I don't know what it is, 5%, 10% yield because there's nothing competing with the tea?
Probably not even that. But what we saw was it was weed whacked and then it was tilled. So it's not like it was just one or the other. It was all forms of garden management.
Yeah, so not every garden was tilled. So we could talk about levels of intervention, which is part of this idea that I want to talk about. And one of the things I hope to do some writing about. But this level of intervention, garden management, you had some wild areas. I want to be clear that in Menghai, we did see some truly wild areas with great tea. And the alpine gardens, the higher elevation alpine gardens, things above 2,000 meters, were less weeded. Those plants don't grow consistently at that altitude. So the gushu gardens were a bit more sparse in other plant life next to the pine trees and stuff. But in these lower altitude areas, we saw a large range. We saw everything from pretty natural untended to simply weeded to fully on tilled to tilled and fertilized to tilled, fertilized, and brought in industrial, like, growth soil. And there was a range there. And we thankfully, the farmers that we were working with, for the most part, only went as far as tilling. And even then, we didn't buy a whole lot of anything from any tilled fields. But it wasn't like we were able to avoid weeded fields.
No, we didn't exactly have the select pick of like, hey, yeah, not those trees right there. But we were able to kind of say from a general level of garden to garden, what garden we were looking for. And once again, Laoban gets what Laoban wants. So we picked to order.
If we bought an entire garden's worth of tea, we would be able to say, okay, now for the next 2 years, no intervention.
Yeah, we don't have multi-year garden money, unfortunately. But if you like, comment, and subscribe now, you can get in on the ground floor of leasing out a garden for the next X number of years.
Well, we joked about that with a couple people. We're like, what would it cost to lease this garden for a number of years?
There's Western vendors that do it. We would not be doing it for sale purposes. We'd be doing it for research purposes, but there's people who do it.
We're not there yet. Just a couple more 100 subscribers, and that's going to be the next project for this book.
So by book number 5, we'll have the money to lease out some gardens.
Book number
2040.
Puer Garden Management for Dummies.
You too can manage your own garden in Menghai or Mengla with this advice.
Grow your first puer tree.
We can get an integrated app and everything. Look at that.
Yeah, baby's first gushu. It'll be 100 by the time you're 100.
Plant it now for maximum returns.
So that's on the soil side. Did you have anything else on the soil side?
I mean, in general, just like really specific observations. We did see a couple different colors of earth in some of the areas we were going to. So Yiwu was a lot of red dirt. We did see some more black earth in some of the areas that we went to. So definitely some different soil, just like nutrient content that we're seeing. So that was interesting. One area we went to that we did buy tea from was Naka. And some of the famous gardens in Naka have this black earth. How much is that contributing to the differences in flavor versus just the overall environment? So the altitude, the exposure, because it is a higher elevation garden. I don't know. But definitely the teas we were tasting in Naka did, as we were kind of alluding to before, taste different than, for example, Bulong area tea or Nanwo tea or anything like that.
Yeah, it tasted quite a bit different than our conception of Menghai tea. There was some of the red earth, but we saw a lot more yellow and black earth. Actually, in Yiwu, you hear a lot of marketing about red earth, but we didn't see any soil marketing in Menghai.
Not at all. No, not at all. And every time we pointed out soil, everyone was like, yep, no major reaction.
Yeah.
So we're much more focused on soil than I think most people Laowai who rock up are.
So we've talked about the soil management. Now I want to talk about the tree management. Do you have a premeditated harangue for our listeners about the tree management?
I just don't know that I had any preconceived notions on tree management for Menghai. And then we got there and it was like, oh my God, they're doing a lot with these trees. We've all read Jingdezhen's book, right? So you've read sections in that book on practices in the early 2000s on decrowning and pollarding. And when you and I were in Yiwu last year, we saw some trees that I erroneously called pollarded. And this year, I have a much clearer idea of what pollarding looks like because we saw it all around Menghai.
And to an extreme level.
Yeah.
Jingdezhen was writing about the late 90s and the early 2000s, but some of those pollards look like they go way further back.
Yeah, I mean, we saw some trees that I'm like, this has to take decades to get the tree to look like this.
50, 60, 70-year-old plus pollards, like easily. That could have been done in the 70s or the 80s.
Yeah. Generally speaking about the trees as well, I mean, just the thickness of these trunks, right? These are different. Obviously, this is a different variety than what we're seeing in a lot of the areas around Yiwu. You're seeing really thick trees. They're, in many cases, you can actually tell that they're planted near each other versus Yiwu, where you kind of see natural outgrowth from a larger central tree.
You see the ring of younger trees around the largest, oldest tree.
Yeah. Whereas here, it's kind of like, all right, there's a lot of very similar age trees all together.
50 trees, all the same age.
Because they were planted at the same time. But the density, the overlap of these trees is huge. Branches are just on top of branches from other trees. And just like the overall yield was something I was not ready for after coming from Yiwu last year. These trees are just easier to pick because everything is set up to be pickable. It's almost like having a plucking table on a tree, which was wild. But yeah, a picker could spend a good hour or two on one tree in Menghai, and the amount of tea they would have versus doing the same thing in Yiwu, I mean, it would be astronomical. It's got to be like 4 to 6x just as far as specific tree yield goes.
Yeah, the things that were shocking, I mean, one is the extent of the pollarding and how old the pollardings were, how much decrowning they were doing on Gushu trees. Like these trees could be making farmers, as we said, in the thousands to tens of thousands of RMB. And they're there with like a hacksaw. They're like, all right, here goes the crown. Maybe after like grown up. Maybe it's different when you've grown up around these trees. You're like, I'm probably not going to kill it. Like, I don't know. If I had a 200-plus-year-old tree in my possession, like, I am not taking a buzzsaw
Nope.
to it.
Not worth it.
And I mean, some of these trees were so cut back to just the trunk that they were literally growing leaves from the trunk, which is something that we hear that the tea can do when it's super stressed. And you don't pick it that year because that tea supposedly tastes awful. But, you know, this extreme level of cutting back dead wood, whatever, fine. But like not just cutting back dead wood, but cutting back live branches and shaping live branches and making the tree pickable and putting up the scaffolding, the metal scaffolding around these dense groves of Gushu. Yeah, it's something that when people talk about ancient arbor and you walk into a forest that has 200-year-old, like 50, 60, 100, 200-year-old trees with some scaffolding around, you're like, this is an arbor. This is like a fruit orchard for tea.
Yeah, this is a commodity. Like this has been commoditized to a degree. I felt that Yiwu was people were managing and tending a forest.
Yeah.
Menghai, people had bonsai trees in the forest and they were tending those bonsai trees in the forest.
Yeah. Little bonsai puer. We talk about this. And again, I want to be at least somewhat clear that there's an inclination, particularly amongst Western tea drinkers, to believe that lower intervention is better, to believe that as wild as you can get, as untended, as unknown, as remote as you can get is going to be the best tea for reasons that we talk about in book 1 of authenticity and commoditization. What does it mean to be real and what does it mean to be good? But despite all this, you know, we walk into an area like the Pasha where there's some real forest management and we could actually see the lines in the earth that separate the family gardens, what families have rights to what gardens and how they do different soil management. And one field in a very old garden, excellent tea that is actually some of the tea that we were drinking was literally right next to a field of similarly aged trees, but that was all tilled. And I wish we had had the chance to try those side by side because that would have been an amazing experiment. But that tea that we had was still excellent tea, right? That was some of the best tea that we found. And it's so easy to have these knee-jerk reactions, say Yiwu was more wild and Yiwu is thus better. And I don't think that's the takeaway. I think the takeaway is that I said this in my talk. I gave a talk at Tsinghua University about the Puer tea when I said, look, no one walks into a fruit stand or goes to buy fruit and says, oh, this fruit was grown in an orchard. Like maybe we've had that experience.
Wild fruit only.
Yeah, wild fruit only. Maybe you had that experience of eating a wild huckleberry or wild raspberry, and sometimes they're great, but it's not like you're saying no to orchard grown fruit. And so should tea be any different? And I don't have a great answer to that right now, except to clarify that my takeaway is not orchard bad. My takeaway is that there's a different level of agricultural intensity and intervention, and these farmers are doing it for a reason. And some of that reason is monetary, and some of that reason is yield, but some of that reason is because these are practices that have been ongoing for quite some time that they believe is necessary for the continuation of viable gushu processing.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we look at parallel industries as well, it's not like we look at high-end wine and we go, oh, well, this was grown on an estate. Can't be good. I prefer when people find wild forage grapes and make 3,000 bottle runs out of them.
3,000 bottles, Pat. The
yeah.
bottle I had last night was a 500 bottle run.
Oh, well, and wild forage, not estate grown.
In the States, on an estate.
Oh, okay. You're halfway there. You're halfway there. But it's just tea, I think we often like to make it seem more exotic and more wild than it necessarily is. And yes, those teas do exist. They're not always good because of those things, right? Because it's wild or because it's from a far out region does not make it good. And the opposite is true. Just because it's not, does not have those attributes does not make it bad.
On that note, I think the last thing about Puer and our portion of the trip together is Yesheng. In Yiwu, there was a real dividing line, and you could taste it between Yesheng and quote unquote cultivated tea. We didn't come across any Yesheng in Menghai.
Not at all. We had teas that were from the Guoyolon of certain areas, state protected forest areas within Menghai. And even those Guoyolin teas of those areas were not, there's not a lot of wild tea that we were tasting. And I think it goes back to the cultivation we were just talking about. All the land in the Menghai area that can be cultivated under tea is very heavily cultivated.
Yeah. It didn't even come up once in conversation. You know, I think that's one of the things that we go back and we start asking people, do you have any Yesheng? Is there anyone making Yesheng? Is there anyone with Yesheng trees? And to taste that and to see if that tastes the same as what we think of as the Yesheng flavor from Yiwu, or if we could find any similarities in it.
When I think about it more and more, I don't feel like I've ever seen, even on the vendor side, people selling Yesheng from Menghai area. I do feel like we see it a lot in northern tea areas, and we see it a lot in Yiwu, broader Yiwu, but I don't feel like I've ever seen like a Bulong Yesheng tea.
Maybe when we get our Menghai samples of Kucha.
Well, so they did have different levels of ku, right? We were looking for still a tasty and enjoyable level of ku, but they did have like ku. They had deadly bitter. So it's possible that that's a wild variety and it's just so bitter that they don't drink it. Yeah, no one drinks it.
We'll get a sample. We'll see what that tastes like. We'll see if we're even able to taste it over the pure frontal bitterness.
Yeah, I think it's not going to taste like anything but chewing aspirin and kugwa.
Well, luckily I like kugwa and I need an aspirin.
Perfect timing. I think that mostly covers what we saw in Menghai. Maybe we cover just some of what we saw for Shou Puer separately. Unless we talk about it now.
We could talk about Shou Puer. We could also talk a little bit about Dai food and Dai barbecue.
Oh, well, food in general, pretty awesome on this trip. We had a lot of good food experiences. Not enough wild rice. We had good rice, but we only had the purple rice 1 or 2 times. But the bitter bamboo, that's one that sticks out for me.
Bitter bamboo was very bitter. That may have been more bitter than Kugwa, but it was very good.
So delicious. But yeah, no, the Dai food was great. We had no Kunming Xiao Kao this time together, so that was the one major letdown of the trip. But otherwise, I really feel like we only had one or two meals that were just like almost everything was really, really good.
Everything was really good. The Dai barbecue, at times I enjoyed more than others, but I would say drinking self-made, homemade Baijiu is real risky business.
Out of plastic water bottles.
Out of, yeah, plastic water bottles. Like if I was worried about my microplastic intake, well,
It's on another level right now.
here's some acid etching out the inside of its container.
Nanoplastics.
I would say, so we had one homemade Baijiu that was made from corn that tasted like drinking White Dog whiskey, and both of us felt totally fine the next morning.
Yeah. And then we, after having barbecue, had some beer and some baijiu. And I don't think we knew exactly what the baijiu situation was, but it was not good. And we did not feel fine the next day.
No, they called it Laojiu, and it was brown in color, and that should have been our warning.
I think they were calling it lajiu. I think it was spicy alcohol.
Was that what they were calling it?
Or it could have been garbage. Could have been garbage alcohol. Lajiu.
Sometimes the dialect seeps into the Mandarin. So there was a couple of times where it could have been one character or another, but it was either spicy alcohol or old alcohol. In either case, it was brown. It was not made from rice, and we did not feel fine the next morning.
No, we did not. No, that was not good. We already talked about it, but donkey was the other interesting meat we ate. Cow penis soup, a variety.
Penis soup. You got which cow penis soup?
It was in Guangzhou Liangzi. It was with the deer porridge, the little tiny deer porridge.
I thought that soup. So what was it? It was deer newbie porridge.
Yes.
And it wasn't. I assumed it was also deer penis, but you're saying it's cow penis.
Cow penis soup, and
Cow
then
penis.
deer vagina soup.
Yeah, deer vagina kanji.
Yes, kanji.
Kanji. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we really got around in Menghai.
Donkey, eating ass, cow penis, deer vagina. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, you conjured this because I sent you that article. You talked about the article on the last podcast. All of our listeners in China asked me about it. That was like the one question that I got. Thanks, Pat.
Come on. Dick soup. Yeah.
Yeah, dick soup. And now here, and then of course you conjured it and we had to eat it. And it was fun.
It was fine. It was a little springy. It was not my favorite, but
texturally deficient. Flavor was as expected.
Yeah, I will not be making it at home. I'll say that much.
I will say also that you could make it in a different style. I think like Sichuan spicy, I think you'd be fine.
Everything is better spicy. Actually, my favorite meal of the trip was probably the last meal we had together, the Jingdong style cuisine.
Yeah, that was great.
Not great before a flight, but my God, delicious. The spice, the flavoring, that was probably my favorite meal of the trip.
I think I agree with that. So that was our food experience. Shou Puer. Next time someone like talks about moldy tea, I don't think they've ever seen what moldy tea actually looks like.
So I've seen pictures and videos of Shou Puer production before. I don't think I was ready to see what actually active fermentation in a wet pile looks like, because that fermentation is active. So we got to touch the piles. You touch the outside of the pile, your hand comes off black because it's covered in black mold, Aspergillus niger, and various Aspergillus species. So I'm saying this tea is covered in black mold. And then you dig into the pile, and you dig deeper and deeper, and it gets hotter and hotter, and you start to see white dust and yellowish dust coming off the pile. And you pull out your hand, it's just like sand falling off your hand because of all the what I had presumed to be various yeast species and spores. So I mean, this is, I don't know, like compost that you left for a few weeks longer than you thought, and you open the lid and you're like, holy shit, like it's really active, moldy, yeasty fermentation.
Yeah, the colonization is so much more extensive than what I had assumed in Shou Puer production. And the level of control that they have is surprising in a way, or the level of knowledge about how to control it, I guess I should say, is surprising. But yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in Shou Puer right now. You have your traditional floor processing, you have like the raised beds, you have hanging baskets, But you also have a lot of individuals who are doing selective strain, like pitched yeast, pitched mold, starter colonizations. And you have a lot of really high-end material. I mean, we tasted some Laobanjiang Gushu Shou Puer.
That I believe is what they said it is too. Outside of that, we had some, what was it? Laotian single tree,
Yeah.
Gushi Shou Puer as well. All of those were actually really interesting experiences. Obviously, the quality of the material going into the tea is important, but I think having a wider range of materials and a broader range of flavor character and flavor profile of that tea going in, and then having a robust traditional fermentation is going to be much more defining of the flavor of the finished product than like having a single tree Gushu Shou Puer. I was actually not impressed with really any of the single picks. And we've talked about this when we talked about Danju last year. Not all single trees are good. And for Shou Puer in particular, when you actually need a certain mass to have a good fermentation, the yield of single tree really gets in the way of developing the flavors you want of a Shou Puer.
I think there's selection bias in there too. I don't know what single tree you're choosing to use for your Shou Puer.
Well, just one of the 50 kilogram producing more northern style tea trees.
But I mean, part of that is like the Shou Puer is in vogue right now when people are paying high prices for it. Like that cake, that Laobanjiang Gushu cake, was like 900, $1,000 US.
It's 2,200. You shared the math with me.
Yeah. Oh, it was $2,200 US. Like, I don't know if I'm going to spend this on Shou Puer.
Well, and we tasted it and it was good, but it was not $2,200 good.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just its own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some interesting stuff going on with Shou Puer. I don't think I'll ever be able to taste Shou Puer again and not think to myself, Aspergillus niger.
Yeah. No, we had a little too much in-depth pitch microbe analysis, and I'm just always going to taste Aspergillus niger now whenever I taste Shou.
Part of what that experience did is I think it made pretty clear that this book 3 on Puer is actually just going to be Shou Puer. That we're not even going to attempt to cover Shou Puer.
No, it's a world unto itself, and it's not the one that intrigues me as much. I mean, it would definitely have to be a labor of love to put together a book on Shou Puer, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of like diverged so much from what's going on in Sheng world. It overlaps certainly, but it's just not. I don't feel the drive right now to write what could easily be 500 or 1,000 pages on Shou Puer.
Yeah, wow. And the level of more fermentation and microbial related analyses would probably be prohibitively expensive to do the level of book that we would want to do.
Yeah, we'll save it for when suddenly we become elderly and stomach challenged and need Shou.
Although it was perfect that we basically had it every morning after like drinking too much bad Baijiu. And so we spent most of the morning, like an hour of just drinking strong, hearty Shou Puer to heal us before getting out for the day.
Shou Puer directly off the fermentation drying pile.
We were just making sure our gut microbe was back in working order after damaging it overnight.
The Baijiu killed it off, and then we recolonized it with Shou Puer.
Well, let's just say, it helped us move along for the day.
Yes, it did. It was necessary recovery. That and the donkey.
That and the donkey. I could have skipped the donkey. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to share on Shou Puer. We'll probably share whatever photos we're allowed to share, and that'll be about that.
My portion of the trip?
Yeah, let me know what cool stuff you did after I left.
After you left, I gave a talk at Tsinghua University on Puer.
They loved you?
They did. It was an interesting talk. It was about Gushu tea and forest management. And it was like 88 slides of photos of tea trees. And of course, then I get there and everyone is like entry level beginner, like my first Puer level. I was like, okay, well, I wish I knew that in advance.
Let me redact 55 of these 80 photos.
No, it was too late. So I was in there. This is going to be a weird talk, guys. We're going to look at 80 photos of trees together. And by the end, I hope you'll be able to identify which is Gushu and differences between them. And it went great.
Nice.
Tsinghua has real scholarship going. They were like,
yeah, of course.
Here we go. This is the challenge. Memorize tea trees.
All right. There's going to be a test at the end.
So that was an interesting talk. I'm going to retool that talk and hopefully I'm going to give it 1 or 2 more times. Amortize the cost.
across a couple talks. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was fun. That was actually a lot of fun. And I got to do some stuff around Beijing and with some tea people there. And then I went back to Wuyi, and I think the thing to talk about there is revisiting a place multiple times, really deepening your relationship to a place opens up a lot of doors, and it really changes the way that you can approach and that you can experience and that you can understand a place. And so we wrote in our very first travelogues about Wuyi that trip was really difficult in a number of ways. And we had better tea outside of Wuyi, better yancha outside of Wuyi than we found in Wuyi up until with one exception. And now going back multiple times and really deepening that relationship, now I can confidently say that all the best yin cha that I've had has been in Wuyi. And just the ability now to be able to sit down with close relationships who know that I'm serious, who know that I'm coming back, who know that I'm not a one and done, like, hey, cool story, goodbye, right? Like, thanks for the tasting, see ya. Now that I've been back so many times, they do things like a friend of mine pulled out 3 Laotsong Meijian teas, all 3 from Zhenyang, all 3 real Laotsong over 100 years, and all 3 of us in cultivar, but from different parts of the park, made by different tea makers. And just the ability to sit there and to taste one after another this Shoupingdong and understand, like, this is all different expressions and different terroir from the same cultivar from fairly compact region. I think that type of knowledge, that type of experience would basically, I don't know another way of doing that. And I think that I attribute this now to this idea of going back to a place that you think you know repeatedly, unless you're living there, unless you're born into that area. There's a whole lot that you don't really know until you're there for a long time.
Yeah. I think just hearing you talk about it after having only been once, I am interested to go again and just see how different our experiences now that you've established these relationships and seen it at different times of year. I think all of that plays into getting a better sense of a place and a better sense of what that place can make. Because my sense of Wuyi is still tainted from that original trip.
And then from there, I went to Jingdezhen.
What you buy me, baby?
You got some things. It's coming. All the ceramics had to be shipped. Couldn't hand carry.
Okay. I'm waiting.
We're coming over. You got something nice. Jingdezhen is such a strange place. There's people doing like legit one-off fungu wares. There's people doing order sizes of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 pieces that are still hand painted. The pricing is all over the place. You see a piece and it's like $50, and then you see the same similar piece, not exactly the same, made by someone else, and it's $500. And then you see the same piece and it's $5,000. They're like, the prices are all over the place. The things that I'm interested in are really hard to find. This is my second year going back to Jingdezhen. Like I said, build those relationships, keep going back. And both times, last year and this year, the one thing I wanted to find was the chai guan, little tea jars, little tiny tea jars to store my tea. And what I didn't find is a single good-looking chai guan. And when talking,
It looks like you're going to Dahua.
everywhere I go, and I ask them about it, and they show me these jars that could hold like 3 kilos of tea. And it's like, how much tea do you think I have? Like, I'm asking for a small jar.
You're just not on their level, bro. That's what it is.
I know. Those things look like showpieces too. Like, is anyone actually putting tea in this thing?
It's more of a weight, like counterbalance sort of thing at that point. You just don't want it to fall. So you're just putting enough tea in there to really weigh it down.
Yeah. Weigh it down. Didn't find anything like that. I did see some small ones. They were really hideous. They were like really hideous. Like garishly overglazed. I found some other stuff. I mean, Jingdezhen's just such a strange place. And there's a lot of different art forms and there's a lot of different people. It's a very transient town too. A lot of people show up, think they're going to do some ceramics, stay for 6 months or a year, and then like run her out. So it kind of feels very extractive place. And there's definitely a bit of an insular community of people who have been there for a lot longer, who are really in industry. when there's very few people doing fungu wares using old clay, old glaze, and the entire place is anti-wood firing. Everyone you talk to is don't pay for wood firing.
Oh, that's kind of a surprise.
They do it because people pay for it. Even the people standing there tending the kiln, you're like, do you think wood firing's better? Like, it's all right. It's different.
No, not really.
The tourists like it. And I will say, despite this, I still like wood-fired wares.
So you paid for it.
Sometimes, I don't know. Maybe it's better to buy wood-fired wares from people who like wood-fired wares.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't go out of my way to buy it from someone who's like, oh, that's a pain in the ass. I don't know why you do that.
Why are we doing this? And then it's even more incongruous to go from Jingdezhen to Yixing. I went to Yixing after, where Yixing batch sizes are like 30 pots, hand-built, or half are fully built. And you're going from Jingdezhen, which can be pretty industrialized, and they don't really care that much about the clay itself, because obviously if it's going to be glazed over, then the glaze is more important than the clay. And then suddenly you're in Yixing, and batch sizes are like 30 pieces, and people are like taking single pieces with like little chips and stuff to repair shops. Like in Jingdezhen, it'll just be tossed in the garbage pile. And in Yixing, they're like, well, actually, this is worth junko and smoothing and refiring. They're spending some real money on these pieces in Yixing in a way that they're not doing, except at the very highest level, a very fungu focused minority in Jingdezhen.
I wonder if just the margins, the cost of production versus what they are able to charge for the ware, I think are just so different between Yixing and Jingdezhen. What basically is passed on to you as a consumer of Yixing is really the cost of the clay and then the maker's time and skill. The cost of the base ware for Jingdezhen, it's not really crazy. You're really paying for hand painting. And yeah, even with Yixing, actually, we saw this, right? For more of the sculpture and artistic work, the cost of hand painted Yixing wares was actually quite high. And that's really what you'd be paying for. But if you don't care about that, then you can get really affordable products with no hand painting.
Yeah, totally. And then very last stop on the trip related to tea was Longjing. I got to go see some Longjing production, and that's an area that you've been to without me.
Yeah, I went for work, and so I saw probably a very specific slice of that. So I'm interested to hear what you saw in comparison.
The interesting thing that I saw is that even the handmade tea is really only half handmade, that basically everyone uses the same identical machine for the shotching process, which is a pretty advanced machine. Shotching is less than 200 grams of tea at a time. And then as it comes out of there, then it goes into the hand walk.
Yeah, I saw similar experiences. This is 3-4 years ago now, but every house, every processor I saw was just like a carbon copy of each other. But yeah, obviously the amount of tea that's there is pretty impressive. I mean, you're driving for a while and you're seeing a lot of hills covered in tea, but the scale of production they've dialed down to is very interesting. Because in Yiwu and Menghai, we saw pretty even batch sizes across all houses, all farms. You're basically throwing 6 kilograms in a walk. Longjing is kind of strange. You've got a lot of micro batches happening in Hangzhou, and that's kind of the norm. And that was weird to me when I saw that.
Yeah. Did you see differences? So one village, there was just one maker I saw. He still used the machine and then the hand walk, but his hand walk skills seemed to be superior. He was actually doing his hand walk without a glove. And his tea tasted very good. And I thought it was quite an interesting experience. He let me have a try on the shotching on the hand walk, burned myself immediately, and didn't have enough skill for him to let me do the entire batch. But I got to do a little bit, and it was hard. It's
hot, man.
It's hot. It's very different than puer, where puer is like basically toss it and make sure it stays at the right temperature. In Longjing, you're shaping the tea.
Yeah, and I think that shaping, that pressing, has an impact on the flavor profile too. Not just from the shape point of view, but the way that it's being pressed into the wok. You can think of like a smash burger, right? I mean, it's going to change, right? The way that the tea is being cooked on the inside. And
it's like a light toasting. It's what gives it that beautiful nutty flavor.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, it's a skill. I've seen videos when I was there. No one wanted to hand process. They showed me videos on their phone. I saw the machine processing, but I didn't see any hand processing. So that's really cool that you got to actually touch it.
I got to touch it, and then I was in a different area. I went to 3 villages while I was up there, and in the main village, which is Longjing Village, is a zoo. I mean, oh my God, there are so many tourists and hikers and cyclists.
I sat in traffic for like an hour just trying to get up there, and then trying to get out was worse.
Yeah, I spent an hour and a half to go down the mountain in what should have been like a 40-minute ride.
Yeah, no, it does not feel magical or unique or special. Like the views are beautiful when you're out there, but when you're sitting in traffic, like slowly pulling up to a gate for an hour, you're like a beautiful tea area, yay!
I actually just got out on my way up. I just got out like a kilometer early and just hiked it because I could walk it up the stairs
Way faster. Yeah,
faster. And I was like, all right, thank you, goodbye. And it was nicer. But on the way down, I didn't have that luxury, so I just stopped and go traffic for an hour and a half. No, it did not feel magical. But in the other villages, in the less touristed villages, it wasn't so bad. It was just that I left from Longjing village to go see the Longjing well and the standard sites.
yeah. I also saw the well, but okay,
Yeah, it would be more interesting if you could still drink from the well.
yeah, not any longer.
Oh. There were some ancient springs, mountain springs, when you and I were in South Korea, that the monks and some tea people had like channeled these ancient springs and were using that water to brew tea.
And that was awesome. There was none of that in Longjing. Yeah, they showed me, hey, here's the original famous bushes, here's the dragon well, and then this is a house that I can't remember if it was Xi Jinping or if it was Mao Zedong. I can't remember who they said stayed there, but they were like, this is a house that was important for political reasons.
Yeah, I think that those 18 trees aren't actually that old, or they're like regrowths from.
After being in Yunnan and after being in Chaozhou, yeah, those bushes don't look particularly old, but who knows?
Yeah, I found some good Longjing tea. I think one of the things that's kind of difficult for me, and I wonder if you have this experience, is now having been in deep forests and different forests and seeing these big ancient trees, both in Yunnan certainly, and even to a lesser extent in Wudong, seeing these huge, beautiful ancient trees, and then going somewhere like Longjing, and field after field. I mean, it's a beautiful sight, but like field after field of these tended manicured trees, and being like, okay, well, Longjing doesn't have any history of Laotsong and doesn't really have any history of this idea of older bushes or anything. And it's like you go there and you're like, is I find it a little incongruous at this point to say, like, is this good? Should I be drinking this? And I like Longjing. I like the taste of Longjing, but I don't know. There's something that nags me in the back of the psyche to think like, how should I evaluate this? If I'm writing all this stuff about the environment and then I walk into Longjing, like Longjing rocks, right? Like
This shit's sick. Well, so when I was in Hangzhou and went to Dragon Well and everything, I was there for work, and so it was a very like, this is pretty, but it's a very corporate feeling experience and a touristy feeling experience. And I didn't get out to any of the further villages, but if it looked anything like what it looks like around Longjing Village, later on that same trip is when we went to Wudong, and that was kind of, I think I told you guys at the time that it was just like so night and day. Like being in Hangzhou and going to Longjing just feels like it does feel like a tourist destination. Whereas many of the other tea sites we've gone to feel like you're going to a tea mountain. There is a different feeling to the air. There's a different feeling to like the earth. I think a lot of what we pay for Longjing is like one origin, right? But I think there's a lot of branding and a lot of story. You do need to be able to separate, I think, the flavor of a tea, right? And the type of tea. You can't really say, hey, you can say, right, this Dragon Ball is good for these reasons, this Puer is good for these reasons. They don't have to be the same reasons. It does get harder when we start to look at what makes Puer good and why that's not the same for drinking well.
if only someone had like some secret little Jian or Kung making Lao Tsong Dragon Well.
Yeah, Taidi, Gushu, Shengtai, Dragon Ball.
Yeah, or just let the trees grow big.
I mean, it does kind of go to what we were talking about with this factory tea, though, where, yes, it's not impressive forest tea, but I'm sure there are areas around Hangzhou where you do have some less intensive garden management. But, once again, these aren't going to be probably the famous tea areas. These are the maybe in the know, secret little nooks. So, yeah, it does get hard when we start to talk about price and quality, though.
To evaluate that. I don't know. That one day maybe a Longjing book, and we'll go seek out just as a whim. I was with some friends in the Longjing area, and we walked up to one of the maker houses, and we're like, "Hey, you have any loud song Longjing?" They're like, "Loud song Longjing." It was my
Yeah.
friend speaking, who is native Chinese, and
And he just looks at you and he goes,
at first
yeah.
I didn't understand her. And they were like, "Loud song Longjing." Oh yeah, I think we have some of that. And then we were like clarifying, like, what do you have? And they're like, 100-year tree Longjing. No, we don't have that.
No one has that. No one makes that. Please go back to Longjing Village.
Why don't you try some more of our tea?
Good.
Just as a win. We weren't sure what we would. The response was more educational than whatever they were actually going to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Jing didn't leave a lasting impression on me, but yet I persist and I will continue to drink Longjing because we enjoy it for a different reason. But maybe one day we'll do a deeper dive.
Deeper dive. Hangzhou has great food.
Oh, good coffee scene too, actually.
I was impressed by the coffee scene in Kunming.
Yeah. China's coffee scene in all of the, even like tier 3 cities, is still way above where a lot of the US is kicking.
Yeah.
Like tier 1 cities, coffee scene is insane in China.
There's some great stuff going on. Really heavily specialty drink focused.
Yeah. Even in Jinghong, we found good coffee.
We found surprisingly good coffee. Have you tried the bag yet?
I finished it.
We haven't opened it yet. We just finished a different bag of coffee. So tomorrow we're going to.
No, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
Was it easy to dial in?
No, it was easy to dial in. This was a very easy coffee to brew. I mean, it's a little bit more medium roast than a lot of what we drink. So it was quite easy to brew and very approachable for my colleagues.
Cool. Oh, that's right. You get to share the work.
Yeah.
I had to buy it with my own hard-earned cash.
I share and I show the experiences to people and it pays for itself.
That's the job.
Yeah.
Any final words?
Just TRT 2027 is going to look really different.
Yes, it is. I think we're going to do some things, but I think hopefully we'll actually hit 2 spots next year. The single spot's been great for a bit, but I think we could use some variety in our lives.
I agree. I don't want to be a Menghai bro for the rest of the year. And I was not converted by this trip.
No, we got some good stuff coming. I'm going to do some TTT tastings, and let's see. We might be converted yet.
Yeah. We are going to be getting tea in from Menghai. We did some commissions, we did some orders. So we'll see if those change how we feel about Menghai.
We will. All right. That's all the time that we have for today. Thank you all for joining us in this special edition of Tea Technique Editorial Conversation. Please join us for our next editorial conversation where we finally resume talking about the chapters.